the logic of total métissage is the production of a single, boring global porridge where everything looks the same. So I want to say, of course, that's not the idea. New forms of difference get generated all the time. There were no Mormons before the late 19th century. There were no Scientologists before the mid-20th century. There were no punks in 1960. There was no hip-hop until the 80s. And these are all important forms of cultural difference that have been generated in the world and appreciated by many people and shaped the lives of hundreds of millions of people. But what I was making was a social psychological point, which is a point that the American political scientist Robert Putnam has made, which is that if you live in a world in which certain historically salient forms of difference are now represented within your own family life, you simply have to take a different attitude. If Catholics are people over there, it's one thing. If Catholics are your cousin Joe, then it has to be something else. And what's happened in the United States, and only recently, so this is not a point about something that happened a long time ago in the United States, it's happened relatively recently. What's happened in the United States is that that's happened. A very large proportion of Americans, unlike 50 years ago, live in multi-religious families. It's a religious society, religion matters, but it doesn't matter in a way that allows you to use religion to divide people, because dividing yourself along religions means you can't talk to your Aunt Mary. So I think that's hopeful in the United States, and I think it's happening all around the world. I mean, my own parents came from two different societies. They got together, they had 4 children, we live in 4 countries. My sisters have been married to a Norwegian, a Nigerian, a Malian, and one of my sisters has been married to Ghanaians and a bunch of other people. She's been married many times. We live, as I say, in countries other than the ones that either of our parents came from, except for my younger sister. We're not unusual anymore. I know lots of people like this, and there are other ways of coming to this. Nowadays, the average person in Britain is likely to have the possibility of knowing a South Asian Muslim person as a friend. They may choose not to, but they have this option. Once you have friends in a certain group, pretty soon your children will start marrying each other, unless you make a huge effort to stop it. So I think this will happen, and I think this will mean there will be links between communities created by these family ties. Even if I don't have anybody in my family except one cousin who married out, that cousin can tell me about Islam if he's married a Muslim woman or something. And so I think that's one of the ways. It's not the only way, and we need legal protection for equal rights and all those other things too. But legal protection for equal rights is one thing. Just saying when somebody says to you, I hate Jews, you're talking about my Aunt Mary, or you're talking about my cousin Michael. That situation shifts the possibilities of prejudice, I think. So, but it won't mean that, as this happens, religious life changes, but it doesn't disappear. Identities change, but they're not replaced with nothing, they're replaced with changed identities. And what we need to do, as we've always done as human beings over the long history of our species, is develop forms of identity that make it possible to live together in the actual lives that we're living. We are not now living in Ottoman millets, in separate piles. We're living together. The modern economy and the modern environment require us to live together. We can't separate ourselves out anymore. So we have to develop forms of identity that draw on narratives from the past, that draw on traditional identities, traditional traditions. We can't simply, you can't just sort of create a tabula rasa and say we're starting all over again. Human beings always start from where they are. That's right. But we have to be imaginative about drawing on the past, about imagining the bits of the past that are useful to us. And the bits of the past that are useful to us in Europe, I think, include some things that were mentioned in the course of the conference, like the amazing history of toleration in Holland in the past, right? Prince William of Orange went to the opening of synagogues, right? Rembrandt had neighbors who were Jews on both sides. And he painted middle-class Sephardic Jewish people painted for them, and he painted them. That didn't stop the society being, Amsterdam being a Protestant city, but it was a form of toleration. And it was a form of, for what it's worth, it was a European form of toleration, and it's one of the things that spread. It's because of that that some of the figures who were able to escape to the toleration of Holland, some of whom were not Jewish, but Descartes and so on, to develop new ways of being in Europe. And I think we need to draw on the right past, and if we draw on the right past, there's always good stuff to draw on, but there's always bad stuff to draw on. We could draw on the bad past too, and so we have to exercise imagination in order to create the identities we need in order to live together in peace. And just one final point. I mean, I think intellectuals are not necessarily the best people at this, because intellectuals want things to be tidy. And mess is actually often conducive to happy cohabitation.